Did you know that many actors and singers from the Golden Age, despite once having great wealth, struggled financially later in life? Redd Foxx, for example, had his Las Vegas home and 7 vehicles seized by the IRS due to tax debts nearing $996,000. Similarly, Billie Holiday passed away with just $70 in her bank account and an estate worth $1,000. This list explores 20 such entertainers who faced financial hardship in their final years. Judy Garland, famously known for her role as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, amassed nearly $40 million throughout her career. Yet, at her death in 1969 at the age of 47, she found herself several millions in debt. Frank Sinatra even took care of her funeral expenses. She was burdened with approximately $4 million in debts, including significant amounts owed in unpaid taxes to the IRS. Garland's financial ruin stemmed from her generosity with money, handing it out to anyone who asked, and the mishandling of her funds by agents and financial advisors. The financial mismanagement by Fields and Bigelman and their embezzlement of her earnings left her with about $500,000 in debt, equivalent to $3,590,000 in 2023 dollars. Despite her personal debts and the IRS levying tax liens against her Brentwood home in Los Angeles and her contract with Capitol Records, she continued to earn significant amounts. Her last performances at New York's Palace Theater brought in over $200,000, equivalent to $1,290,000 in 2023. Yet federal tax agents seized most of these earnings. In her final days, Garland was compelled to perform in lesser-known venues, including a London nightclub where she had a 5-week stint earning $2,500 per week. In her last will, drafted in early 1961, Garland included numerous generous bequests that were impossible to fulfill as her estate had been encumbered with debt for many years. Her daughter, Liza Minnelli, with the aid of family friends, worked tirelessly to settle her mother's debts. In 1978, Garland's personal belongings were auctioned off by her ex-husband Sidney Luft, supported by their daughter Lorna and son Joey, offering nearly 500 items ranging from copper cookware to musical arrangements to help support the Hares. Errol Flynn, the Australian-American actor celebrated for his romantic swashbuckler roles and frequent collaborations with Olivia de Havilland, is another example. Known as well for his hedonistic lifestyle, Flynn's fortune dwindled due to his lavish spending on yachts, homes, and an extravagant lifestyle. He faced numerous legal challenges, including a high-profile 1943 trial from which he was acquitted but which incurred significant legal costs. Flynn was notorious for his lifestyle involving women, excessive drinking, smoking, and, during the 1940s, drug abuse. His addiction to alcohol, tobacco, and narcotics, along with a substantial divorce settlement awarded to his ex-wife, actress Lily DeMita, severely depleted his wealth. His financial situation worsened after a failed film project, William Tell, which collapsed when investors pulled out, leaving him indebted. Flynn's life ended in 1959 after he traveled to Vancouver, British Columbia, to discuss leasing his yacht, Zaka, to a businessman named George Caldo. Barbara Payton, who graced the screen alongside Lloyd Bridges in 1949's Trapped, James Cagney in 1950's Kiss Tomorrow Goodbye, and Gregory Peck in 1951's Only the Valiant, succumbed to heart failure at the age of 39 in 1967. After years of struggling with drug and alcohol addiction and turning to prostitution to support her lifestyle and addictions. Payton's ascent in Hollywood began in the late 40s when she arrived and was promptly discovered by William Cagney, brother of the famed actor James Cagney and head of Cagney Productions. At her peak, she was earning an unprecedented $10,000 a week, a staggering sum at the time, particularly for a budding actress. But her success was short-lived. Her engagement to Franchot Tone marked the start of her decline in the film industry. During her engagement to Tone, Payton started an affair with B-movie actor Tom Neal. She oscillated publicly between Neal and Tone until September 14, 1951, when Neal, a former college boxer, severely assaulted Tone in Payton's apartment, leaving him in an 18-hour coma with extensive facial injuries and a concussion. This incident tarnished Payton's reputation, making her undesirable to studios and effectively labeling her as box office poison. Her attempts to revive her acting career were unsuccessful, and by 1962 she had resorted to prostitution. In 1963, she agreed to receive $2,000 for a candid autobiography, "I Am Not Ashamed." After years of substance abuse, she died of liver and heart failure at her parents' home, without the means for a proper burial, and her remains were quietly cremated. Elvis Presley, the American singer and actor dubbed the King of Rock and Roll, is celebrated as one of the pivotal cultural icons of the 20th century. He debuted in Hollywood in 1956 and starred in hit films like Jailhouse Rock, Blue Hawaii, and Viva Las Vegas. Throughout his illustrious career, Elvis amassed earnings estimated between $100 million and $1 billion. However, by the time he passed away from a heart attack in 1977, at just 42 years old, he had only $5 million left in the bank, alongside a debt of $10 million in unpaid taxes to the IRS, stemming from extravagant spending and his drug addiction. Elvis was known for his lavish expenditures, including owning multiple Cadillacs, purchasing homes for his entourage, spending exorbitantly on wardrobe and concert costumes, and acquiring 3 multi-million-dollar jets. Additionally, his financial affairs were poorly managed, with his advisor and manager, Colonel Tom Parker, taking a 50% cut of every dollar earned. Following his death, Elvis's estate, burdened with significant tax liabilities, was inherited by his ex-wife Priscilla and his father Vernon. Priscilla diligently worked to salvage the estate, transforming Elvis's Graceland home into a thriving tourist attraction. Her efforts eventually paid off, and by 1993, the estate's value had increased to $100 million, which was then passed on to Elvis's daughter, Lisa Marie Presley. Sammy Davis Jr. was a legendary American entertainer who began his career in vaudeville at just 2 years old, performing with his father, Sammy Davis Sr., and the Will Maston Trio. He later transitioned into film in 1933. Despite his success, Davis faced significant financial struggles due to his lavish lifestyle, which included multiple homes, luxury cars, and expensive jewelry. His tax issues worsened over the years as he often received cash payments for performances, but failed to report them properly. To reduce his tax burden, Davis invested in various tax shelters, but when these were disallowed by the IRS in 1972, he was hit with a massive $15 million tax bill. In his final years, while battling throat cancer, he toured with Liza Minnelli and Frank Sinatra in 1988 to help manage his debts. When he passed away in 1990 at the age of 64, his estate was valued at around $4 million. But he owed over $7 million to the IRS due to penalties and interest. His widow, Altavise Davis, who had co-signed their joint tax returns, became responsible for the debt and was ultimately forced to auction off his belongings and real estate to settle the financial obligations. Fatty Arbuckle was a celebrated silent film star in the 1910s and became one of Hollywood's highest earners by 1920, with a contract from Paramount Pictures worth $1 million annually, around $15.2 million today. However, his career took a disastrous turn following a 1921 scandal, where he was accused of manslaughter in the death of actress Virginia Raft. The legal defense costs for 3 criminal trials depleted his wealth, leaving him with over $700,000 in legal fees, equivalent to $13 million in 2023, forcing him to sell his house and cars to cover some of the expenses. After his arrest, numerous exhibitors removed his films from circulation, severely damaging his public image and career. Despite being acquitted and receiving an apology, the scandal's stigma lingered. In March 1922, with his films still banned, Buster Keaton attempted to help by granting Arbuckle 35% of all future profits from his production company. Arbuckle tried to make several comebacks and finally found success as a film director under the pseudonym William Goodrich. He also secured a contract with Warner Brothers to star in a feature-length film. Celebrating his first wedding anniversary and this new opportunity, he remarked, "This is the best day of my life," only to suffer a fatal heart attack that night, passing away in his sleep. Dorothy Dandridge was a pioneering American actress and singer who became the first African-American woman nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actress for her role in Carmen Jones. Despite this significant achievement, Dandridge faced persistent racial discrimination that curtailed her opportunities and income in the entertainment industry. Financial mismanagement further compounded her difficulties. She discovered that her financial handlers had embezzled $150,000 from her, and she was left with $139,000 in back taxes owed. This financial strain forced her to sell her Hollywood home and place her daughter in Camarillo State Hospital, a California state mental institution. Dandridge downsized to a modest apartment on Fountain Avenue in West Hollywood, California. By 1963, as her popularity waned, Dandridge performed in nightclubs to manage her debts, which included numerous lawsuits and unpaid taxes. She filed for bankruptcy and retreated into seclusion, only to emerge as a lounge act in Las Vegas in 1964. In 1965, she attempted a comeback by signing a new contract in Mexico to star as the female lead in a film about outlaw Johnny Ringo. Tragically, on September 8, 1965, Dandridge died at the age of 42 from an accidental overdose of antidepressants in her West Hollywood apartment, leaving just $24 in her bank account. Mary Provost was a Canadian-born actress who rose to fame during the silent film era, beginning her career in 1922. She thrived at Warner Bros., becoming a prominent leading lady and a favorite of director Ernst Lubitsch, who cast her in comedies such as The Marriage Circle, Three Women, and Kiss Me Again. However, the transition to sound films proved detrimental to many silent stars, including Provost, whose voice did not adapt well to the new technology. After Warner Bros. Released her in early 1926, her career declined rapidly, relegating her to smaller roles. Personal challenges further marred her life. The death of her mother in 1926 and a divorce from actor Kenneth Harlan in 1927 plunged her into deep depression. She turned to alcohol and began binge eating, which led to significant weight gain and further diminished her opportunities in Hollywood. By 1935, Provost was only able to obtain minor parts in films, and she made her final film appearance in 1936. Provost succumbed to acute alcoholism in January 1937 at the age of 40. Her estate was valued at a mere $300 after she had depleted most of her earnings. Her tragic end prompted the Hollywood community to establish the Motion Picture and Television Country House and Hospital to assist stars and their families who could not afford health care. Billie Holiday was a celebrated American jazz and swing music singer, known for her distinct vocal style that was heavily influenced by jazz instrumentalists, altering phrasing and tempo in innovative ways. Throughout the 1930s and 1940s, Holiday achieved widespread success with record labels like Columbia and Decca. At the height of her career, she performed to sold-out crowds at Carnegie Hall and earned as much as $1,000 per week at esteemed venues such as Cafe Society. However, as her fame escalated, so did her addiction to heroin and alcohol. Despite earning substantial sums from club engagements, she squandered much of it on heroin. Her lover, Joe Guy, exacerbated her drug problems by supplying her with narcotics while she was working on a film in Hollywood, leading to his banishment from the set by her manager, Joe Glazer. The 1950s brought further challenges after a drug possession conviction cost Holiday her New York City cabaret card, crucial for performing in venues that sold alcohol. This significantly hampered her earning ability, and compounded by the fact that she was not receiving proper royalties from her recordings, her financial situation deteriorated. Her records eventually went out of print in the 1950s, resulting in negligible royalties, and by 1958, she received a meager $11 in royalties. In May 1959, Holiday was admitted to the Metropolitan Hospital in New York under arrest for drug possession, handcuffed to her hospital bed. By the time of her death on July 17, 1959, her financial situation was dire, largely due to being defrauded by McKay, a mob enforcer she had married in 1957. She died with only $70 in her bank account, approximately $740 in today's dollars, leaving behind an estate valued at $1,000. Veronica Lake was an iconic American actress during the 1940s, celebrated for her femme fatale roles in film noir alongside Alan Ladd, and for her famous peekaboo hairstyle. Her roles in Sullivan's Travels and I Married a Witch were particularly notable. However, by the late 1940s, Lake's career began to wane, partly due to her struggles with alcoholism and a reputation for being difficult on set. She made just one film in the 1950s and appeared in a few television shows. Financial troubles hit hard when Lake and her then-husband, Andrew DeToth, announced plans to make Flanagan Boy and Before I Wake, but the projects failed to materialize due to their worsening financial situation. In April 1951, the IRS seized their home for unpaid taxes, and later that year, Lake and DeToth declared bankruptcy. Overwhelmed and on the brink of a breakdown, Lake left DeToth and moved to New York. She attempted a comeback in the film Footsteps in the Snow, but it failed to rejuvenate her career. In 1962, a New York Post reporter discovered her working as a waitress under the name Connie DeToth at the cocktail lounge of the all-women's Martha Washington Hotel in Manhattan. Lake's final days were spent battling hepatitis and acute kidney injury in a Vermont hospital, where she died alone. Buster Keaton, renowned for his silent films, was an American actor, comedian, and filmmaker famous for his physical comedy and innovative stunts. In the peak of his career during the 1920s, Keaton earned $3,500 weekly and even built a $300,000 home in Beverly Hills. However, 1928 marked a pivotal downturn in his career when Keaton signed with MGM as talkies gained popularity. This decision, which he later deemed the mistake of his life, led to a series of sound comedies that were moderately successful at the box office, but coincided with personal challenges, including a crumbling marriage to actress Natalie Talmadge, with whom he had 2 sons, and struggles with alcoholism and depression. By 1934, after his MGM contract ended, Keaton declared bankruptcy, listing assets of just $122,000. He divorced his second wife, May Scriven, in 1935 and later married Eleanor Norris, who played a significant role in revitalizing his life and career. Keaton eventually reclaimed his reputation by returning to silent film work. He passed away on February 1, 1966, at the age of 70. Terry Thomas, an English character actor and comedian, gained international recognition through his roles as untrustworthy upper-class characters in films during the 1950s and 1960s. In 1971, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, which gradually ended his career. His last film appearance was in 1980. By 1983, as his medical expenses soared to $40,000 annually and his ability to work diminished, Terry Thomas' finances began to dwindle. He and his wife sold their dream home and relocated to a modest cottage in Spain, left to him by his ex-wife, Pat Patsy, upon her death in June of that year. Facing increasing financial difficulties, they returned to London in 1987, living in rented properties before settling in a 3-room, unfurnished charity flat, supported by the actor's benevolent fund. Richard Briers, one of his first visitors at the flat, was deeply moved by his condition, describing Terry Thomas as a mere shadow, a crippled, crushed shadow. It was really bloody awful. In 1989, his friends and fellow actors organized a benefit concert that raised $775,000, allowing him to spend his final years in a nursing home. Terry Thomas died there on January 8, 1990, at the age of 78, after nearly exhausting all his resources in his fight against his illness. If you're enjoying this video, show your appreciation by giving it a thumbs up. Haven't subscribed yet? What are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button now. Bela Lugosi, the Hungarian-American actor famous for his iconic portrayal of Count Dracula in the classic horror film Dracula, as well as roles like Igor in Son of Frankenstein, faced significant challenges in his career due to being typecast as a horror villain. His addiction to morphine and methadone, which began as a treatment for chronic sciatica, further impacted his career and financial stability. Forced to accept roles in low-budget films, often for minimal pay, Lugosi struggled financially when his son Bela Jr., was born in 1938. He couldn't afford the hospital bill and had to borrow money from the Motion Picture Relief Fund to cover the costs. Eventually, the bank foreclosed on his home. However, in his later years, filmmaker Ed Wood, an ardent fan, cast Lugosi in several of his films, giving him star billing once more. During the post-production of one of these films, Lugosi sought treatment for his drug addiction. The premiere of this film was intended to raise funds for his hospital expenses, but only gathered a small amount. When Frank Sinatra learned of Lugosi's financial troubles, he visited him in the hospital and donated $1,000. Lugosi passed away from a heart attack on August 16, 1956, at age 73, leaving behind modest real estate and only $1,000 in cash to his son. Bud Abbott, the American comedian, actor, and producer best known as the straight man of the comedy duo Abbott and Costello, also encountered severe financial troubles, largely due to tax issues. During World War II, Abbott and Costello were among the world's most popular and highest-paid entertainers. From 1940 to 1956, they starred in 36 films and earned a percentage from each, ranking among the top 10 box office stars nearly every year from 1941 through 1951, and reaching number 1 in 1942. In just 35 days during the summer of 1942, they sold $85 million in war bonds. However, a disagreement over the division of profits and their lavish spending and gambling habits led to a decline in popularity in the mid-1950s. Substantial demands for back taxes by the IRS forced them to sell most of their assets, including the rights to many of their films. After their long-term contract with Universal ended in 1954, their request for more money led to their release. After the death of Lou Costello in 1959, Abbott tried to continue performing but was hindered by poor health and epilepsy, struggling to find work. Eventually, the IRS seized his home for unpaid taxes, forcing him into a small apartment. In his final years, Abbott made televised pleas for financial help from his fans. He died on April 24, 1974, at the age of 78, with his remaining assets insufficient to settle his debts. Ed Wood was an American filmmaker, actor, and pulp novelist, renowned for his work in the 1950s directing low-budget science fiction, crime, and horror films that later garnered a cult following, such as Glenn or Glenda. His films are celebrated for their campy aesthetics, technical mishaps, unsophisticated special effects, poorly matched stock footage, eccentric casts, idiosyncratic storytelling, and non-sequitur dialogue. During the last 15 years of his life, Wood primarily supported himself by writing erotic novels, earning between $700 to $1,000 per novel, which he often spent immediately on alcohol. Paul Marco, a close associate, recalled Wood lamenting about his financial woes, saying, "My God, I've given everything away. I should be a millionaire. I should have $1 million right now." Wood and his wife faced frequent evictions for failing to pay rent. Their final days were spent in a dilapidated apartment in a high-crime area of Hollywood, surrounded by drug addicts, gamblers, and prostitutes. In 1978, as Wood's depression deepened, he and his wife, Kathy O'Hara, were evicted from their Yucca Street apartment for overdue rent. They were forced to leave behind all of his scrapbooks and unfinished screenplays, which were purportedly discarded by the landlord. The couple then moved into a small apartment in North Hollywood, owned by their friend, actor Peter Coe. On December 7th, Wood spent the day drinking vodka and making desperate calls to friends for financial help, which proved fruitless. He died from a heart attack on December 10th. Red Foxx was an influential American stand-up comedian and actor, best known for his raw nightclub acts during the civil rights movement and as the king of the party records, having performed on over 50 records throughout his career. Despite earning a reported $4 million in 1 year, according to People magazine, Foxx faced financial ruin due to extravagant spending, which he attributed to very bad management and costly divorces. His financial obligations included over $150,000 in expenses related to his divorce from his second wife, Betty Jean, including $10,000 a month in support payments. After separating from his third wife, Joy, in 1979, he was ordered to pay $2,000, $500 a month in interim support, culminating in a $300,000 divorce settlement in 1981. The financial strain led Foxx to file for bankruptcy in 1983. Further compounding his financial woes were IRS tax liens on his property for unpaid income taxes from 1983 to 1986, totaling $755,166. In 1989, the IRS seized his Las Vegas home and 7 vehicles, collecting taxes that had escalated to $996,600 with penalties and interest. They also took $1,716 in cash and numerous personal items, reportedly leaving him only his bed. Foxx's financial troubles continued until his death in 1991, at which point he owed over $3.6 million in taxes. His funeral expenses were covered by his longtime friend, Eddie Murphy. George Raft was an iconic American actor known for his role as Guino Rinaldo in Scarface, and for starring in films like They Drive by Night and Some Like It Hot. Despite his high earnings, Raft faced financial troubles later in life due to his penchant for gambling, which led to significant losses. Furthermore, he made some career choices that potentially cost him greatly, such as turning down roles in The Maltese Falcon and Casablanca, roles that eventually went to Humphrey Bogart and helped elevate Bogart's career. At one point, Raft earned as much as $18,000 per year, but by the mid-1960s, his financial situation had severely declined. He declared bankruptcy in 1966 amid growing debts and tax issues. Attempts to revive his career with smaller roles and public appearances failed to restore his financial stability. Raft died from emphysema on November 24, 1980, at the age of 79 in Los Angeles. He left no will, and his estate consisted only of a $10,000 insurance policy and some furniture. In his final years, he subsisted on about $800 a month from Social Security and his pension. His personal effects and wardrobe were eventually sold through a classified ad in Hemmings Motor News for $800 in the fall of 1981. Bobby Driscoll was a prominent child actor in the 40s and 50s, starring in major Walt Disney Studios productions like Song of the South, So Dear to My Heart, and Treasure Island, as well as RKO's The Window. At the peak of his career in 1950, Driscoll earned $1,750 per week, a substantial sum at the time. However, his career began to wane in the mid-1950s, leading to a reliance on guest appearances on anthology TV series. His life took a darker turn as he developed a narcotics addiction and was eventually imprisoned for drug use. Released in early 1962, Driscoll found himself unable to secure acting roles. Disillusioned, he remarked, "I have found that memories are not very useful. I was carried on a silver platter and then dumped into the garbage." In 1965, after his parole ended, he moved to New York City, attempting to rejuvenate his career on Broadway, but was unsuccessful. Tragically, Driscoll was found dead in an East Village tenement in 1968, lying on a cot with no identification, surrounded by empty beer bottles and religious pamphlets. His body remained unidentified until late 1969 when, upon his mother's request for help from Disney Studios to locate him due to his father's impending death, a fingerprint match by the New York City Police Department confirmed his identity. Driscoll had been buried in a pauper's grave on Hart Island. Florence Ballard was an American singer and a founding member of the iconic Motown vocal group The Supremes, celebrated for her powerful voice, which Berry Gordy described as the backbone of the Supreme sound. Ballard sang on 16 top 40 singles with the group, including 10 #1 hits such as Where Did Our Love Go and Baby Love. At the peak of their popularity, the Supremes were considered one of America's most successful vocal groups, with Ballard reportedly earning around $100,000 annually. However, Ballard struggled with the pressures of fame and her personal issues with depression, turning to alcohol for relief. This led to tensions with fellow members Diana Ross and Mary Wilson, and ultimately contributed to her missing performances and recording sessions. On July 1, the day after her 24th birthday, Ballard appeared intoxicated during a performance at the Flamingo, visibly unfit for the stage. This incident led Gordy to demand her return to Detroit, and she was swiftly replaced by Cindy Birdsong, marking the end of her time with the Supremes. After her departure in 1967, Ballard attempted a solo career with ABC Records, which did not succeed, and she was dropped from the label by the end of the decade. In the early 1970s, she faced foreclosure on her home and descended further into poverty and depression. Her plight became public in 1974 when news of her welfare application leaked. Florence Ballard passed away on February 22, 1976, from a coronary blood clot at Mount Carmel Mercy Hospital at the age of 32, leaving barely enough to cover her funeral expenses. Cliff Edwards, also known as Ukulele Ike, was a prominent American musician and actor in the 1920s and early 1930s, known for his jazzy renditions of pop standards and novelty songs. He scored a #1 hit with Singing in the Rain in 1929 and famously voiced Jiminy Cricket in Walt Disney's Pinocchio. Despite his early success, Edwards was reckless with his finances, frequently indulging in lavish habits and an expensive lifestyle. His prosperity dwindled during the Great Depression, and most of his income thereafter went towards alimony payments to his 3 former wives and settling his debts. Edwards married and divorced 3 times, further straining his financial resources. He declared bankruptcy 4 times throughout the 1930s and early 1940s. His habits as a heavy tobacco smoker, drug addict, and gambler also exacerbated his financial woes. In his later years, Edwards lived in a home for indigent actors and frequented the Walt Disney Studios, hoping for voice work opportunities. He died on July 17, 1971, at age 76, as a penniless charity patient at the Virgil Convalescent Hospital in California. Initially unclaimed, his body was later secured by Walt Disney Productions, which had been covering many of his medical expenses, and the burial was arranged by the Actors Fund of America. Both of these stories reflect tragic arcs of immense talent coupled with personal and financial turmoil. Let us know in the comments which of these actors and singers you think deserved a better fate. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell for more engaging content about the stars of yesteryears and their legacies.